and Priorities Committee meeting to order for Monday, January 13th. Take approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Noxana.
That all items in the January 13th, 2025 Policies and Priorities Committee meeting agenda be approved as presented.
Seconder. Councillor Norbury. All in favor? Carried. Adoption of minutes for December 9th, 2024 Policies and Priorities Committee meeting minutes. Recommendation, please. Councillor Norbury.
That the December 9th, 2024 Policies and Priorities Committee meeting minutes be approved as presented.
Seconder. Councillor Clickash. Any errors or omissions from council? Staff?
No.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Any business arising from the minutes, council? Anything from staff?
No.
Thank you. Okay, on the report, 6.1 fire training facility assessment, reported dated January 13th, 2025, from the Director of Protective Services, Fire Chief, regarding the fire training facility assessment. Recommendation? Councillor Dussault.
That council receives this report for information.
Seconder.
Or discussion.
Does anybody want to discuss it first before we do it? Okay. Councillor Julich, put a motion, please.
That council receives this report for discussion.
Seconder. Councillor Noxana, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Julich.
I have a few questions. I'll just start with a couple and see if there's any more, and then so I don't hog the mic. So I'm wondering, as we have the firehouse in this report as well, it's ultimately $1 million for this in the 2 stages. So I'm wondering how that might affect the fire hall. And I guess part of that question is, when I read the report, it talked about being a full-service fire department. And in order to be a full-service fire department, if I understood the report correctly, this is why we needed the training facilities. And so I guess I would like some more information on being a full-service fire department.
Ms. Scott.
I'll ask the Director of Protective Services to give you more information about what it means to be a full-service fire department.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So to Councillor Julich's question, a full-service fire department is one that conducts all of the things that you would think that your fire department would do outside of having things that you're putting out fires. You're talking about doing public engagement. You're talking about doing fire prevention activities. You're doing community risk assessment, emergency management. These are all things that a full service department would do. In the context of this report, a full service department liaises to the 3 levels that you are currently mandated by the province. So there's an exterior department, which means that you only fight fires from the outside, an interior department, which means that you would fight fires from the inside of simple structures as long as there is a pre-fire plan, and then a full service department, which is everything to the NFPA 1001 level 2 standard, which is the highest accreditation and standard that we have for firefighting, so that we can go into areas where we do not have pre-fire plans. We can go into complex structures and still do our jobs without having real-time information on any changes that were done to the property or the like.
Follow up, Councillor Julich.
So my question then is, do the mines have their own fire departments or fire services, correct? Except they are not at the same level as our fire department. I guess what I'm trying to get down to, and to be able to have the questions asked so that anybody watching also understands, when we start talking about spending money around these services, why is it important? I think that it's important, and just hearing the breakdown of those three things makes me even more so. Like when I hear full accreditation, being able to go out and do whatever kind of thing, my mind immediately goes to the mines and what would happen there, because we're a long ways away from another fire department. So I don't see the possibility of us going down to another level. So I guess, just to get confirmation that yes, we are the backup for the mine. The mine doesn't have their own ready-to-go fire department. They have like a keep at hold kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'll go to staff in a minute. So the mine has mine rescues, so they do have some of their own apparatus for suppression, extricating individuals out of mine trucks or such. But they do have an agreement or the District of Tumble Ridge Fire Department definitely goes out on site when they're needed. They've been to the Wolverine site for sure. They've been out to Quintet when it was under, I guess, renovations. They had the plant started on fire, so I know our fire department did respond. Ms. Scott?
Yeah, so again, I'll ask Director Curry to be able to give you a greater insight into what all services that our fire department might assist those industries with.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mayor and Council, so yes, most industries, including windmills, local mines, et cetera, they do have their own emergency response teams. In case of coal mining, it's called a mine rescue team. They are historically only trained to the BC Surface Mine Rescue certification, which is only a very small fraction of what a suppression fire department would be qualified to. In more recent months, there is discussion about them increasing their suppression level to what would be confirmed as a industrial fire brigade. So it's going a little bit one step further, but in the past, they have not had the facilities to do this. Now, I know that there is, I believe, some plans in place for Canuma, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but to have an actual training facility on site so that they can increase the level of what they are able to provide. But historically, we have actually put the mine rescue teams through fire and smoke training through our current fire training center, just on the off chance that we may need additional support. And we're right in the final stages of actually developing a true mutual aid agreement with Canuma specifically, so that we will have the ability to go out to site, and we do and have. But furthermore, they would be able to come into town and provide us with a basic amount of fighting personnel trained to a standard that we are comfortable with.
Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. It's a great report. I'm glad to see, proper training structures available. I mean, it seems like in the report that what we currently have isn't suitable for what it does. And we're seeing, we can have these steel shipping containers, but the cost was, I guess, do we have any other sourcing for budgeting for the containers? We saw there's a couple of examples of other places that have done it. We weren't able to get any cost estimates from them. My thought is that it's already a price tag here, but that's just a best guess.
Ms. Scott?
So again, I will ask Director Curry if he has any information or comment on how accurate those figures might be in the report, or if he has any idea where else we could get more accurate information, or maybe he already has.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. To Council's question, the numbers in the report are loosely based on industry standards of what they're seeing in other places. I don't believe that these are reflective of what we would be looking at building. I think that we can reduce costs to this. Contained in the 2024 to 2028 financial plan was actually a capital improvement plan for the fire training grounds. There was a price that was actually allocated per year, starting last year with the amount for the feasibility study and then moving forward. So as part of your discussions or your budget deliberations for 2025, there is an amount that's going to be in there in order to get the ball rolling on this. And I think it's going to be nearly what you see at stage one for 2025, and then a lesser value in 2026, and then a lesser value in 2027. Just at this point, we don't know what we don't know. We need to be able to get what we can salvage out of the current training grounds. What does that look like? There's a lot of prep work that still has to happen. You'll notice in the report there's no actual area identified of where we would actually move a training grounds to. There's some criteria, but we haven't done a lot of investigation on vacant lots within the municipality. There's a couple that are being tossed around, but ultimately that's going to be council's approval for where to move such a facility.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kukalka. Councilor Julik already brought up Kanuma Coal. Like, there was discussions before about potentially teaming up with them, offering, you know, our site for training for other industries. Has that been explored at all? If we could get some partnerships to help with costing?
Ms. Scott?
So again, I'll ask Director Curry to provide any information he can about whether or not those conversations have occurred and what the results of those conversations might have been.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So yes, preliminary discussions happened, I would say, the better part of a year and a half ago with Kanuma. And they were just armchair kind of, what do you think about this kind of thing, if we were to do this? Now, we have to be very careful about what we do in business and how we liaise with them. So to directly go to Kanuma and say, hey, would you pretty please partner with us for it is not kosher. So we would be looking at other partnerships as well, perhaps with Coastal Gas, with our wind energy partners that are in the area. We'd be putting it out for an open call to see if there's anybody that would be interested to partner with this in order to reduce costs. Now, what does that look like operationally? Because it'd still be our facility and we would have to provide a technician. We would have to make sure that it's being done safely. We would have to have, have some staff time that would be involved in that. That can all be built into some type of a fee for use kind of model where they have a flat fee, they come in, and then that's a revenue generating thing for the district. So all of those things will be explored should we move forward with this type of thing. One thing I neglected to mention in the previous answer was we do have a quote out with Container West, who is a builder of these things, in order just to try and see if the costs that are actually contained within this report and our budget are going to be in line with each other. We don't know when that's going to happen, though.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up?
Yeah. Naming rights. I know we allow nonprofits to do naming rights for other things. Is this an opportunity that we could offer some naming rights on?
Our policy specifically says we are not allowed to use naming rights on municipal facilities. It talks specifically about the fire hall. So if we wanted to look at that, we would have to amend the policy first.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? So before I go to Councilor Julik, I just want to make sure there was nobody else that hadn't spoke yet. So, yeah, I thought it was a fairly thorough report that we received back. And Staff had already mentioned, and that was one of my things is, are these coming purposely built? Are we looking at modifying? Because I know other organizations that have done the modifying or had a company within the area that could modify a CCAN with the proper doors and stuff. But Staff had already answered that question in regards to it. I know a site has not been picked, but has Staff, again, this was in previous councils, again, relooked at the transfer area for fire grounds? Ms. Scott?
The transfer station area, is that, so I don't know if that area has been specifically or is still specifically looked at. So I will ask, again, Director Curry, if he can give any information about what areas are currently being considered.
Oh, sorry. I thought you left it on. My bad.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So specifically, we've looked at other reports that have come to council in the past about moving the training grounds. I know that one of the areas down by the transfer station was previously looked at. But there are going to be logistical concerns with any place that we choose. Nothing's going to be cookie cutter and fit all criteria. One of the biggest concerns with moving down to the transfer station was the ability to maintain response times was one of the big ones. And then having the access into and out of the training grounds from the transfer station. So we'd have one way in, one way out. Again, there's going to be areas that are going to work in regard for nice open space out of the way of the prying, the public eye. But we may not have water supply, we may not have hydro, we may not have some things. And then there's going to be ones that are going to be closer to maybe residential subdivision. In one of the very last pages of the report, there's an aerial view of an open area. This is right across from the Saddle Clubs, or from the Saddle Club rather. There's 2 vacant lots that the district currently owns. in that area. It was just used as this is what we need. We need open space. We need to be able to take a fire engine off of the street, put it into an area, be able to turn around, have an aerial that we can do this with. We've got the equipment. We need the space to do so. So in coming back to council with that, I would say that all areas that fit that criteria even slightly are going to be up for council's purview.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And the reason I asked that question about the transfer area again is because of the reason of the pitch that was put in the report. I mean, that's when you first enter the community, the first thing you see is that. Again, to me, the idea of moving it out of a light commercial area is because of the commercial buildings near it or the residential that's on the other side of it. To me, I'm not interested in it being near a residential area either. So 10 years or 30 years from now, we got to move it again because it's too close and we're getting complaints. And again, that's why I bring up this, the transfer station area, because it was talked about. I know staff had looked at response times and such like that. But to me, when we talk about that, and I don't want to get right into it, but to me, when we talk about we're on training grounds and everything else, to me, the response time is not going to be much of a difference because you're not driving from home back down to the fire hall. Your apparatus is usually right at the training ground. So I just hope we look at that scenario, and that's my insight for myself, is in regards to we're trying to move it out of a light industrial area that's close to a business as well as a business / a residence, that we would not be looking at moving it anywhere near a residential area for having that same concern. We had a session in regards to the development of Tumble Ridge and areas of development. Same concept. I have a concern like that when we're going to start talking about expanding up on the back of Wolverine or whatever those ideas were with property that is owned. And then we're going to have a fire training grounds just down below it, and then we're going to get complaints. So to me, we need to make sure as we move forward that to me, it's in the right location. One, for obviously response time mentioned by staff, but also so that we don't have to look in 30 or 40 years from now that, we've stuck it in the wrong spot 40 years ago, we need to move it again. I think that's very, very important when we're spending the money that's listed within the report. When we talk $50,000 per CCAN, yeah, they can be moved. And I think that's you're seeing more and more of the CCAN usage in all fire training grounds instead of the cement complexes like some of the bigger centers first constructed was cement ones. Obviously the CCANs are probably less expensive at the end. I got Councillor Julick and then Councillor Norbury.
So yeah, I just want to follow up and confirm this report is to give us information before we talk about our budget, correct? All right.
That's my understanding. That's why the option from staff was for information. But Ms. Scott, just want to confirm.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just, yeah, I'll have more questions then. I think it's important that we move it as well.
I'll be honest, I think that with the report up for discussion, not to cut Councillor Norbury off, but honestly, if we have any in-depth questions, now's the time. We have a report in front of us. It's probably fresh in the mind of staff, sorry to use the word director, but in front of staff as well. They've probably been through it. So if we have any, not that they won't be able to answer it in budget. I mean, I imagine they're reading it as much as we are. But if we have any questions like this is the PMP, it's a little bit more relaxed and easier for staff to be able to communicate back and forth to council. Councillor Julick, or Councillor Norbury, sorry.
I can tell Chief Curry is very relaxed. Thanks, Chief. Yeah, with the Saddle Club, I'd be worried about putting it out there. The horses are delicate creatures at times. When we talked about the pump track over there's concerns of dust. I can only imagine of potential stuff in the air, noise pollution, whatever. So I'd be hesitant to put it over there. And yeah, good points by Mayor Kukalka about, that's going to be residential at some point, right? My question is in regards to phase 2, and that's the heat. Let's get my wording correctly here. The heat module. Where else in the region is this offered? We'll be the first ones in our region. Is there any towns our size that offer heat training? Yeah, thanks.
Ms. Scott?
And that's definitely something that's beyond my knowledge. So again, I'll ask Chief Curry if he can provide any information about that.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Okay, so to council's question, the fire service as a whole is making great strides when it comes to protecting our individuals, right? Fire and safety, making sure that we're not exposing our firefighters needlessly for the sake of training, for the sake of, X, Y, Z. So what we're seeing now is a definite shift from the Class A burning facility that we currently have now. So we burn normal, and when I say Class A, it's normal wood, paper products, hay, straw, your normal organics. So we're shifting from that to more of a propane-based training facility. This still gives the appearance of heat. It gives the firefighters the exposure to heat, not in quite the same way, but in more of a controlled manner. And we can say that there's no impurities that are going to be in there. There's nothing that is, it wasn't soaked in gasoline beforehand. It didn't have creosote that was in there. It didn't have the, whatever, it wasn't treated lumber or anything like that. So this is where we're seeing that. That's why this is included in here. It's undetermined yet if we would make that transition. I think if we're going to be following the industry standards that are coming out, we need to be protecting our people, and we would be, remiss if we did not look at that as an option to say, moving with propane it is going to still accomplish the same goals. But I'm a little bit old school when it comes to this, and you don't get quite the same feeling as an actual fire that's burning at 900 degrees Fahrenheit in a basement setting where you are in effect in a chimney. The propane just can't give you that type of an effect. Now, there's a lot of, is that actually warranted? Do we need to? What's the likelihood of we're going to face that? How can we best accomplish those goals through alternative means? So that's where that module would be there. And we also would use that module to provide all of the valving and everything for all the natural gas props. So currently at our facility, we have a natural gas prop for car fire, for a BLEVE, which is boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. Is the technical word for it. But we also have dumpsters that are hooked up for natural gas so that we can simulate those types of fires in a respectable and safe manner. So that module would encompass any of the props that would be inside the building, as well as any of the props that would be external to the building, such as a car, a dumpster, or a BLEVE.
So before I go to Councilor Norby, it's a way of controlled environment. They can shut it off if they needed to. Pretty hard to shut off a bunch of wood that's already lit on fire if something was to go down. It takes a few minutes for it to be shut down, but you can shut it down. So you see them lots in Texas. So when I was on the fire department, not to get right into it, but we used to get shipped to Texas because of we had gas plants beside us. They would send us down there for the gas training, and you could shut it off. If something went down, you can shut it off. It takes a couple minutes, but it shuts off. But follow up, Councilor Norby?
Yeah, thank you. So I appreciate the explanation of why it's important. My question was, like, where else is this available? Like, do we currently get this? So it sounds like you do a little bit of training in town with heat. Do you have to go out of town to provide it? Is it available? It's like Dawson, Chetwynd, Mackenzie, that sort of thing.
Scott?
So again, referring that question to Director Curry about where else that kind of training facility might be available within the area.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. I apologize, Councilor Norby. I went kind of in a roundabout way, circled your question. So these types of training facilities are fairly local. There's one in Fort St. John. There's one in Dawson Creek. Both of those, Dawson Creek for sure uses Class A materials, so they're still using heat as part of it. The most recent one that I know of to this standard being with only propane, I believe, is in Alberta, central Alberta. They just built one, Tabor, I think. But it is, right now, we currently use heat, but we use the Class A materials. So we're still using the burn can that we have. We're still feeling the heat, but we're not doing the propane side. We have to take significant steps over and above that to make sure that we have safety lines and safety officers and other things in place to mitigate the risk for using Class A materials, where it would be a lesser for us to do it with propane.
Follow up.
One last one before
Yep.
Councilor Julik. Thank you for your patience, Councilor Julik. What's the life expectancy for both of these modules?
Ms. Scott?
Again, I will ask Director Curry if he can provide information about what the life expectancy could be.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So to Council's question, it's very widely dependent on the amount of use that you're going to put through this building. In a metro department that's using it on a weekly basis or a daily basis for some of their crews, and they're doing lots of live fire, this could be 25 years. For us, I mean, the training grounds that we've got, that CCAN was put in by my predecessor in mid-2000s, late 2000s, and it's still showing signs of usage. It's still usable in its current fashion, but it's exposed to significant heat. It's a steel structure, so it's going to fatigue quickly, especially when you're talking about significant heat, such as the Class A material. So for our usage, I would say between 35 to 45 years would be my guess.
Thank you.
Councillor Jilek.
So I'm just looking at the budget here. Would we be bringing somebody in, like, obviously not for the engineering site assessment and stuff, but the site prep and that type of thing? Or is that something we would be doing in-house?
I would think it'd be an RFP. Ms. Scott?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. The question is, how much of this would have to be done by external sources? Or,
Or if we would?
Or if it's going to be done in-house, like site preparation, foundation, and pad.
okay. So again, I will ask Director Curry if he can provide any information on that.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So to Councilor Judith's question, this would be done through an RFP process, and it would be a complete. It would not be any of our staff time to do any of the other than the business case for selecting the site and determining, put that to council before we get to that point. The issuance of the RFP would include site prep, foundation, all of the engineering that would be associated with that, because some of it is they're built on site in a lot of cases. So any of the engineering that would happen, it would be all encompassed.
Follow up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciated the report and the pictures, because that's how I focus, how I figure stuff out. And I really appreciated the three communities that they chose as, while they weren't bang on with our population, they were close, and Athabasca was right there with us. So, yeah, I really appreciate the report. I think that it encompasses most of the, well, you wouldn't think most of my questions, but answers most of my questions.
Okay, thank you. I know Chief Curry, or sorry, staff had mentioned in regards to Dawes Creek and Fort St. John. I know the previous council, and there was some conversation about the training grounds, there was a real big push on, well, what about it like regionally and stuff like that? And I just want to make sure council has all the information. So it was proposed that the regional district looked at buying out Dawson Creek's Fire Training Center. And then it would be used regionally. When the PRRD looked at that, we feared it would not be cost smart, I guess I'll use. One is expecting some of the other municipalities to contribute, but try to have them go there to train. At that time, I believe, and don't hold me to the number, but I believe we had 11 or 12 members. It's pretty hard to send a member out of the community for whoever's available on the weekend to be able to go and train with another department. So that option was looked at regionally. It just didn't make it with the travel distance between all of our communities. It didn't make sense for the PRRD to look at purchasing the Dawes Creek Training Center for regional training grounds. Okay, any other questions in regards to the fire training facility assessment? Okay. Okay, moving on to Fire Hall Feasibility Study, report dated January 13th, 2025, from the Director of Protective Services, Fire Chief, regarding the Fire Hall Feasibility Study. Recommendation. I put a recommendation on the floor that the council receives this report for discussion. Seconder, Councillor Noxana. All in favor? Carried. I'll start off with one question, Ms. Scott, and I was in and see Ms. Scott, so I just want to make sure there's nothing that I'm missing. My question to Ms. Scott was asked, is there something missing within this report? And the reason I asked that question was, to me, it just seemed like when I looked at the report in regards to feasibility study and what was all being added, it seemed like maybe we were looking at maybe going to a full-time hall, and we're not being aware of it within this report. So I just want to ask that question. Are we looking at going to a full-time fire hall?
No.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead. If you want to go, Councillor Duke, I got a bunch, so go ahead.
I just wanted to know what you meant by full-time hall.
So all firefighters would be full-time. 24/7, staying in the hall.
Oh, they would, oh, okay, thanks.
That was a question I had for when I went to the hall I seen. That was some of the information within the feasibility study. That's why I asked that question. There was something maybe missed. Okay. So I do have some other questions, Ms. Scott. My questions would be like to me, it looks like we brought forward the feasibility report, but actually there was a previous one that never became in front of council. Are we, like, there was another company hired that was supposed to do this report, and I believe it was budgeted in 2022. I know it takes a lot of time to have done, but it was to look at what the cost of the repairs of the current fire hall would have been for a cost, and then what it was a cost for building a hall. When I read through here, it sounded like there was information received from the first company that was awarded the RFP contract, and staff weren't happy, so they sent it out to another company. Is there a reason why we would not have seen that first report?
Yeah, and because that was before my time, again, I will ask Director Curry if he can provide any information on the questions that you've asked.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. To the mayor's question, yes, there was a previous feasibility study done by another firm. The study itself, in both cases, both architectural firms came to the conclusion very quickly in the study that the repairs and the renovations to the existing structure would vastly outweigh the potential to build a new one. So when we're talking about the things that are contained in this report, such as adding another bay onto, adding another a second floor onto it because we don't have shower facilities, we have a leaking roof, we don't. There's a lot of things that has already been presented to council on why this needs to be done, whether there was an envelope and we need to change. The way that we do things now is vastly different from how we do things in 1982 when this hall was built. The company that completed the report produced the report in a very similar fashion to what we have here. They did not have, or the first company didn't have, the second company didn't have access to the first one. Ultimately, the costs were so cost prohibitive. I would be remiss if I did put that in front of council for you to consider. When we started talking about doubling, more than doubling the cost that's in this report that you're seeing tonight, we had to verify our data. We didn't have faith in the data that we were getting from that company. They were very experienced, they had great references, but for one reason or another, it was at the time of the cycle where costs were high for building. And to be truthful, I don't think they had a grasp of what it was that we were looking for and what our community is. So yeah, that's why.
Okay, my other question would be, what was the cost of that first initial report?
Again, if Chief Curry or Director Curry can remember what the costs were in that report, I'll ask him to relay that to you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. It was $24.6 million.
No, not the cost of the hall, but the cost to have the company do it.
Oh,
To
sorry.
submit the report. My apologies if I didn't word
No,
it correctly.
that's fine. I would have to pull it up. I believe the RFP was for $27,000. I would have to take a look at our records.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor Nobury?
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. And I can appreciate not throwing good money at bad, especially if it's in the $20 million range. I'll be honest, looking at this report, I definitely have some sticker shock. You know, $11.7 million for a new building, when Mayor Kakalka asked a leading question of, is this for a full-time hall? Because it seems like it is very top of the line. And don't get me wrong, when we go out, sometimes let's see what do we absolutely want versus what do we need, right? And what we have now isn't what we need. It's not good enough, it's not functional. I fully support that, I get it. How are we gonna pay for this? Do we have we're going into it's going to our budget deliberations, but you know, what's the thoughts? I know we're going to investigate, but is there any grants on the horizon that we could put this towards to? Is this going to be purely from savings and taxation?
Ms. Scott?
I don't know if there are any grants that are available. I know that's something that in the report that Director Curry said he would investigate. So I'll ask him to answer that in a moment. But in regards to how else we finance it, I mean, just some loose thoughts. As you mentioned, it would be going to budget deliberations, but some loose thoughts would be, part of it would be funded from reserves and surplus, and part of it we would borrow, is, I think, probably the recommendation that staff would make. But again, I'll ask Director Curry if he's got any information on any potential grants or other sources of revenue to help offset the expense.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So the current thought is exactly that it is going to be a culmination of a few different funding sources. Transfers from reserves, it could be taxation, that's not favorable for that. But looking at grants, they are few and far between for grants, so we may be looking at something that similar to what we did with the community center, where we go through a long-term borrowing scenario to say that we are going to borrow this for the next 30 years and pay it down, or some type of a scenario like that. That doesn't preclude us from actively searching for grants. On page 23 of the feasibility study, there's a wonderful picture of the Mackenzie Fire Hall, and that was like 95% paid for by grants. So we know that they're out there. It's just at that time trying to find where to apply for them, how are we going to get that funding, and move forward in the best financially responsible way. To Councilor Norbury's point, and to the mayor's point, this is not a full-time fire hall. This is not the Ferrari of fire halls. This is a very scaled-down version of what fire departments are in 2025. You'll notice that there's no sleeping quarters in this. There is a shower facility on the main floor, which is required. Yes, there is a relaxation area on the second floor that you can see with a gym that's there. We have a storage room that's converted into a gym now. It's multi-purposed, but this is definitely not. This is more just capturing what we need, and there's not a lot of nice to haves over need to haves in this building.
Philip?
Thank you, Mayor Kukalka. You know, I can appreciate your comments, Chief, you know, but I see a training room, you know, I see a secondary lounge room that also seems like about the similar size of multiple people sitting at. Fitness center, when we already have a fitness center that all members get access to. Yeah, was there any other options to explore with less of these, you know, expenses in there? You know, we're going from 5 apparatus bays to, like what we currently have, I think is 5, up to 10, I believe, 8. Maybe we only need 6.
Yeah, Ms. Scott, just be aware, we only have 4 bays right now.
Pardon?
I was
We
talking.
only have 4 bays, and I'm saying, well, we have 5 apparatus.
Oh.
right?
Whatever. Ms. Scott.
So again, I'll ask Director Curry if he can provide any information on if there are still some areas for potential cost savings in this proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. There's always going to be potentials for cost savings. I would be neglectful if I said that this was the absolute thing that we're going to stand on. Absolutely not. There's always going to be wiggle room. We currently have 6 bays. In this report, we have 6 bays. We currently have 3. That's all we have is 3. We rent a 4th one for the smallest of the trucks that we have, to the tune of, you know, I won't get into prices, but we rent that bay on an annual basis. We are going to be able to save that cost on a yearly basis. We also have 2 additional bays onto this building for search and rescue, understanding that we are going to be taking, should this building be built, we are going to be taking our wildland vehicle away from that. I will not need that bay anymore, so search and rescue will be out. Now, when I say search and rescue, that was the intent, was going to be search and rescue, but that's not circumvented to only being search and rescue. It could be BC ambulance for the additional 2 bays that are there. But that's the easiest way to save costs right there. We could cut those last 2 bays right out of it and we'd be fine with that. I need 6 bays that are there. So there's always going to be potentials for that. That those extra 2 bays, that could be a long-term lease with BC Ambulance that now is revenue generating and covers some of the costs for the long-term debt that may be associated to this. There's all of those kind of things that are there. The last comment that I want to make is to Councilor Norbury's about the training room. So you'll see in that little thing, it says training room EOC. This building would be the only building in the district that would be built to post-disaster construction. Nothing else that we have is currently to that level. That building would now be the primary EOC. So we would no longer be in this room for our emergency operations centers. We'd be completely standalone with an actual a diesel generator, which actually makes it post-disaster, as opposed to the natural gas generators that we have here. There's a lot of forethought that came into this building about how to not just use it as a fire hall, to use it as for emergency management when it's needed. It really is going to be that emergency management beacon for individuals. Could we convert the upstairs lounge room into a sleeping area for firefighters? We did that with our training room and had them sleeping on cots. Could we do the same thing upstairs, but now they have an access to shower facility and a kitchen area where they can actually get some downtime, get some rack time, get a good meal, and then have to go back to that. I know that that's planning for the eventuality, but that's what we need to be doing at this point, is not just looking at what we need now, but looking at what might we need in the foreseeable future and balancing that with what is the pipe dream that is a fire hall, which we don't want to be to that point. We need to be respectful about what we're asking for.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Chief Curry. Because realistically, right now, we're looking at purely tax funded. So we need to be having these discussions about how can we scale this down, right? If it's 95% funded like Mackenzie's, I'm in. Quick and easy, I'm in. But realistically, at this point in time, we need to look at what is a need, right? Now, one of the comments that Chief Curry made was, when we have firefighters that need to stay in the fire hall, like the fire that we had recently. So, we had the extreme fire event. We had our firefighters stay in unideal locations. I can appreciate that. But it's happened twice in the last 20 years. We're planning for, a once in 10-year event. What's the life expectancy of the building? So we're going to use it 3-4 times. Yeah, it's great that we're planning for it. Yeah, but I mean, if it's more often than twice every 20 years, I'm open to hearing that. Yeah, thanks.
I'm not sure, Ms. Scott, if staff would have a comment in regards to how often possibly used. We're talking that it's been used. We've had an issue or concern twice in about 18 years. I'm not sure if staff want to comment on a win. Okay, I'm good enough. I know I wouldn't want to comment, but if you don't, and that's fine, that's a tough one. I just wanted to give the opportunity that it was asked by a councillor. Before I go to Councillor Knox, I do have a couple of questions, and staff had mentioned it. And it's within the report about the Tunbridge rescue, search and rescue with that building and having the extra base possibly for them. Do they have any equipment in the bay that we rent now? And that's the reason I said 4 bays, because we have 3 at the fire hall and the one we rent. Do they have any equipment in there, like vehicles or that, within the one that is being rented right now by the district?
So again, I'll ask Director Curry to provide information about what search and rescue is using that bay for.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So currently in the bay that is rented by the district, they have their 20-foot enclosed travel trailer. It's a multi-use trailer. They use it for communications and events. So that is in there. They have their training facility, or essentially their meeting room that's in there, equipment-wise. So they've got some tables, chairs, things like that. They have office equipment that's there. They have some storage lockers that are there. They previously, to us putting in Squad 8, because it was a little bit bigger, they had they actually had their snowambulance that was in there, and they also had a 4-wheeler that was actually in that bay as well. They've since repurposed that and moved it to a different location, just because logistically it was a little bit tight for when we put our truck in there.
Okay, I appreciate it. I wasn't sure what they had all in there, so thank you for that. You also mentioned in regards to BC Ambulance, and I was going to make a comment later on, but you've already made the comment, so I'm going to start having that conversation. And my thing, I wonder if we're a little bit early in regards, not early for the report, but early in finalizing the concepts and all this. Because have we had the conversation with BC Ambulance? Because they would need, my understanding, they're full-time. I know what their needs are. I used to work for BC Ambulance. So they need sleeping quarters and such. And the reason I bring this up is this is an opportunity where they would build either their own hall beside yours, or the district, sorry, my apologies. And same with the RCMP. I believe there's been discussions about the RCMP looking at their needs for a new building. And I can't remember the year that it was talked about. But is this also the same opportunity? And staff had mentioned it. Maybe they don't want to build their own halls or station. And it's something that gets added on to something that's already being built where we lease it. And to me, I think that's the kind of the information that I need to have more of a debate. If this is the pick of the pick, is this an opportunity to be able to cover some costs long term? You know, when we look at the fire hall we have today, it was built in '82, I believe staff had just said. So we look at how many years that's lasted with, you know, lack of maintenance. Not staff's fault that's in this room, but to me, a lack of maintenance. When I just heard the roof's leaking. I mean, it's been leaking for years. It's not a new leak in 2023 or 2024. You know, I look at town hall in regards to maintenance being held up by council, the previous councils. So to me, when we build something like this and we actually have heart and care and have an upkeep and a schedule for regular maintenance, you know, we can look at 50, 60, 70 years for some of these buildings. You know, that can really, when we have those conversations, whether with BC Ambulance or the RCMP, what does that look like? What's that look like? And I think those conversations, you know, need to happen because this might be an opportunity where we look at all as one. You know, I appreciate staff's comments about, well, we'll have 2 extra bays. We could, you know, I'm assuming not lease it to search and rescue. It's probably a donation. To me, that's a government mandate. They're under the government, and maybe the government needs to buck up for search and rescue within all of British Columbia, not just Tunbridge. I know they're totally underfunded. The PRD definitely supports search and rescue through their organization, which obviously Tunbridge pays into, so we support it from that. But to me, they're underfunded. And when you go and see what they do and partake in things like Geopark, Santa Claus with the Geopark, you know, the search and rescue was out. They're out volunteering just like the local volunteer fire department. You know, so to see those men and ladies out there doing that, I think, you know, we need to look at that. But I think the government also has to come forward. But my comments would be that, one, I don't even know today who owns the RCMP building. I know it's in our budget in regards to, I believe it's I want to say it's part of our funds for a new building for the RCMP. I imagine we have to pay a certain amount. I'm not sure how that works. Apologize, but I don't know that. I know Ms. Scott and I had a conversation during our agenda review about the ambulance station and a police station, if that's something that we should be looking at the same time. Do we know from staff side how long those conversations would need to be had? Maybe BCM is willing to build their own side of it, same location, can't guarantee that. But no, they don't want to really build, but if we build, they'd sign a 50-year lease with us. Like, how long do those kind of conversations take?
How long do they take from start to finish to get
Yeah,
equipment?
good luck. Eh?
They could be lengthy. And so those kinds of conversations are things that I have not had and I have not started, and to be honest, hadn't even given consideration to. I don't know who owns the RCMP building or what the district's responsibilities or obligations would be in regards to our share of replacing that building. But again, because I'm a little bit late to this game, you know, where the first feasibility study happened in 2022, perhaps some of those conversations did happen that I'm just not aware of. So again, I will maybe ask Director Curry if he has any information about whether those conversations have happened, have started, if he can provide council any more information.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So the topic of a tri-service building has been brought before councils in the past. There are a lot of issues that take place with trying to deal with multiple levels of government in order to try and come to a common goal. The building for the RCMP is actually federally owned, so we can't do anything when it comes to, it's a federal crown building. Trying to deal with multiple levels of government in varying budget cycles is also difficult when we are trying to have meaningful discussions about how this is going to be paid for, whether that's all on the district's dime and then you go into lease agreements with them. I can tell you that from my recollection, from the last time that the budget was actually done for a tri-service building, this would have been mid-2000s, the price tag for that building was more than what you're seeing right now in this report, in mid-2000s. So you can use your imagination to see what the cost would be for such a building today. I have had off-the-cuff conversations with BC Ambulance, both unit chief and their regional manager, to say, hey, is there any plans for you guys to build a new hall? Like, what are you guys planning on doing? And it's on a work plan, but we have no idea when it's going to be on a work plan. And it's been on a work plan for a lot of years. So there is probably a higher likelihood that they would want to move into the fire hall now that we have versus moving into or spending the money to sign a long-term lease. Now, that's not to say that it's not happened. There are other communities that have partnered with ambulance. Creston is a great example. They just built a brand new fire hall, and they have an ambulance bay that's the side of it. But again, it was built before they had the current model, so then they had to do some reconfiguring in order to put sleeping quarters for their ambulance attendants to actually be able to use the hall in its current fashion.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, and that's why I brought it up. I mean, obviously, we're a full-time station, we're at Alpha Car now, so there is some expectations from their side, and that's why I thought it might be something worth looking into. My last question would be, at this point, would be, appreciate all the pictures of other fire halls within the report. Did we ever look at just a basic fire hall, something like Beaver Lodge? Pictures of those, what the cost of that was, what's the criteria there? I mean, that's a new hall, just opened. Ms. Scott?
So again, I'll ask Director Curry if he can provide any information about what other types of fire halls or what other communities' fire halls were considered for inclusion in this report.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So yes, other buildings were looked at in terms of what type of a fire hall. The type of fire hall that was built in Beaver Lodge is a type 2 regular combustible steel building. There's nothing fancy about that building. It is very industrial looking. It would fly in the face of our downtown design guidelines. And when we're talking about the first thing that people see in our downtown core, do we want a fire hall that looks like a commercial building that looks at that? So it wasn't, because we have plans already in place, it was not something that was looked at in depth, understanding that the cost difference, I would be spitting off the cuff for the cost of that building. I believe it was a little bit north of $3 million for the Beaver Lodge Fire Hall. For that versus what we would be looking for. I get there's a considerable price difference to that. But there's an aesthetic component to that.
Thank you for that. I got Councillor Noxon and Councillor Julik.
Thank you. I'm going to have to agree that a $11 million price tag is a lot, especially if we're talking about aesthetics adding potentially millions of dollars. My main concern is if the conversations haven't happened with BC Ambulance and BC RC or Tumbler Ridge RCMP detachment, then I think we might be a bit ahead of the game looking at a plan when we don't know if this is a plan that would be needed in Tumbler Ridge. I'm not in favor of moving forward with an $11 million bill if this could be scaled back, if this could be changed to accommodate other user groups. Yeah. It's just.
So I just want to make a comment, just so we're not setting off to staff, and I appreciate it. I never got to thank staff about the RC. I feared it was federal, but I didn't want to say it and be wrong, so I appreciate it. It wouldn't be within the same building, it would actually be extra. I want to make sure council's aware of that. I think staff had mentioned that, so I'm not saying that the fire hall is what it is today that's been put in front of us, because we can, ask for different changes maybe and stuff. But if we were going to add BC Ambulance or the RCMP, that would be extra. So I just want to make, it wouldn't be within the, my concept when I mentioned that to staff, and I did have a talk with Ms. Scott about it, it would be like an ambulance station on the side attached, and an RCMP building. I can't remember what I can't remember what staff had called it in the first conversation, because I know previous councils had this conversation. So it wasn't that it was a fire hall and everybody was within it. It was the fire hall and then whether it's the RCMP or the ambulance, and then, so it's just a multi-complex emergency something. I'm not sure if staff would give us the wording again on the building. I apologize, I didn't write it down.
And again, I don't remember what the wording was either, so I'll ask Director Curry to repeat it.
Ms. Scott, it's a tri-service emergency.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off, Councillor Roxanne, but I just want to make sure that that's what I was looking at, to try and fit it within the same scope. To me, it sounds like, we have 3 bays at our fire hall, but a bay that we also rent. So to me, I looked at, we have 4 fire department bays, maybe just not there. So I said 4 when Councillor Norbury asked the question, and it's only because I know that we have a vehicle parked elsewhere. So, sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to make sure you knew what I meant.
No, mine was more of a comment that 11 million is a lot. I think we need to look at some other options before we move forward with what we have in front of us.
Thank you. Councillor Julick and then Councillor Clickash.
Yeah, I gotta agree, stickers, with the sticker shock comment. I was laughing though when you said Ferrari, because I was trying to think about what could I compare F-150 to another level, because that's what I was asking. My thoughts were around nice versus needs. I appreciated that term that Director Curry used. I would disagree in that I think that there's more than just looking at a building. I agree that we talk about design. We talk about the type of community that we live in, and I think that it's important to make sure that we keep with those design guidelines. I had a student once tell me, because I was all up in arms about the hospital in Grand Prairie, and I'm like, well, why would they make it all those curves? It makes more sense if it's square boxes, all of that type of thing. And the response was, and this was a younger person telling me that, are you building a place to, basically, do you really want to live someplace where everything's just a box? That there's feasibility in building the town that you want to live in. So I appreciate the sample that was here, and I agree with Director Curry in the design style. I also believe that part of recruitment and retention of staff is being proud of where you work, working in a place that's easy to work in, that you're not worrying about whether the toilet's gonna flush, or if you gotta change this or you gotta change that, if the roof's gonna leak, all of those things too. So I think that while $12 million, that I didn't start there right, $12 million is a lot of money. $12 million over 40 or 50 years is still a lot of money. I still think though that it's important that we have these buildings. We need them. I think the first person whose house burns down because we don't have a proper facility, we're gonna have some upset folks. I was scared during the evacuation, what that was gonna look like. This building gets us ready for things like that. We look at the $12 million price tag, and I think it's important that we look at the other things that we spend money on as well. And this is at the heart of, nobody needs the fire department until they need the fire department. And then when they need the fire department, they really, really want the fire department. And if we don't have a facility where we have volunteers that can train, we're really fortunate that we have a volunteer fire department. If we have a facility where we don't have firefighters that are trained, that want to stay here because they're working in an environment that they can actually do training and feel like they're successful, I don't know. I'm going on and on about why I think it's important. I think because I'm trying to sell it also to everybody else in the room, because I think it's important. If Director Curry thinks that there's a few other places we could cut corners, maybe we don't get the black sink, we get a stainless steel sinks or whatever. I don't know what that looks like. I just think it's important that we look past the price tag.
Thank you. Councillor Clickash.
Yeah, I agree that cutting things out of the building that's been designed properly and meets all the requirements as far as the building code, and I think you have to stick with that. But you also have to pick a spot where this building is going to go so that you can determine the full cost of it. As far as the RCMP building, I've talked to them. I talked to the people that run it, and there's a lot of issues with it. They don't have a proper storage area in it for anything they collect as far as items towards a particular case or whatever. They just don't have that area. The place was built 40 years ago, and they're sleeping on concrete in the actual cells and stuff. It's I don't think that meets our requirements in these days. But anyway, that if you want more information about the RCMP and their willingness to maybe go in with a building or so forth, you contact the just trying to think of the name. It's Public Works Canada, and you can get a hold of them in Vancouver, and they were very interested in, when I phoned them and talked to them, this is probably 10 years ago now, but they were very interested in having a new building and being involved with that. They even talked about leasing. They talked about just a separate building, but they wanted somebody to take it and build it for them at that time. As far as the ambulance is concerned, somebody just came up to me about 2 months ago and said they want to build a 2-bay ambulance place behind our visitor center. And I don't know what that would look like. But anyway, that's what they were talking about, and they felt that they had some interest in doing this. So anyway, but I don't know, Public Works Canada, just get a hold of them, and they'll answer all your questions, but have everything ready for them, all the information ready for them, because they're going to want to talk about it. They got some experts there that know what they're doing. So. Good shit.
Okay. I got Councillor Knox and then myself.
Thank you. Just a response to Councillor Julik. I think that we're all in favor of well-trained firefighters, but we just, in the previous discussion, talked about the training grounds and how amazing that would be for our community. And I think we can all get behind training. This is a facility to house a part-time fire department. I think that, yes, people need to be proud of where they work, but we also need to be responsible to our taxpayers. And I'm really feeling like $11 million is not responsible to our taxpayers, especially if we hear that Beaver Lodge spent a fraction of that for their fire grounds or their fire facility. So I really would advocate for us looking at cost-saving measures for this building.
Okay, thank you. I guess I apologize to staff because I did bring up, like, what about other firehouse like Beaver Lodge? So I didn't just use Beaver Lodge. I used Beaver Lodge as an example because I know it was one of the newest ones I've seen. So I apologize to staff to throw it out there like that. And then, like, to me, I don't want to debate Beaver Lodge. I understand where you're coming from, but I didn't throw it out there for that reason. It was, did we look at those kind of options in regards to pictures? This, like, I mean, I look at what, I guess I apologize. I'm assuming it was the person that put the report together. It was not staff that had these pictures here. But it just seems to me, again, I looked at it, one was the diagrams are received, and then some of the types, and is there different options out there that we could look at? And you see what you get for what you pay compared to what has been put in front of us and such, and maybe we have to change some of our zonings and stuff like that we've already pre-approved. It doesn't mean we can't. My other comment or questions would be back to staff, if I may, Ms. Scott, is on page 37 of our agenda, talks about an office for the fire chief. Great. Office for deputy fire chief. Do we have an office today for the deputy fire chief? Because my understanding, we have an front desk. But do we have an office today for the deputy fire chief?
That's another question I will ask Director Curry to provide an answer for.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. No, we do not have an office for the deputy fire chief. That doesn't mean that the reception area is the best spot for the current place where we have the deputy fire chief.
Okay. Ms. Scott, can you, no, never mind. I'll ask that question later. Office for coordinator, can that be explained to me?
Again, I will ask Director Curry. Maybe Director Curry can give a brief overview of all of the office spaces or all of this space that is in the drawing, just to give council all of that information up front.
Happy to, Ms. Scott. Just pulling it up here. So there's an office for the fire chief, an office for the deputy chief. We've talked about that. The coordinator, this would be multi-use for the fire smart coordinator is what that would be right now, but it also could be used for an emergency management coordinator or anybody else that we would have in that spot. It could also be used as a workspace for firefighters that are taking exams, anything like that, just a multi-use space. Should we not have a coordinator at the time? It was designed that, yes, it would be coordinator. There'd be an office for the coordinator, but it could be multi-use. We'd have an office for the bylaw enforcement officer. That's there. The training room, I think we've talked about, so we have a training room / EOC. So this would be the storage room that's adjacent to the bylaw office. That storage room, it would be housing all of the tables and chairs and potentially cots or anything like that we would have for the EOC, understanding that we do not need all of that equipment that is currently downstairs here and taking up a storage room. We wouldn't have that in this building. We would have that over at the fire hall. Top of the page, you have a waiting room with a washroom. We currently do not have a public access washroom that is publicly accessible and accessible for wheelchair access. We currently do not have doors in the front of the fire hall that are accessed through wheelchair accessible. As you walk into the waiting room from the top, if we're working our way down, you have entrance to go directly into the training room from the waiting room. This is understanding that we would provide access to this training room for anybody that would be potentially using the additional bays. So if this is search and rescue and they need a place that they still need to conduct a training night or tabletop exercise or anything like that, they don't have to go through the entirety of the fire hall to get to the training room. They can just come in through the front doors and go into the training room. So if that would be on your right. If you're looking at the set of doors right there, that would be a secure door. So now we do not have people that are entering the building without access past this point. So this would be a locked door where we'd have a waiting room. We can keep the public on that side. We can keep the business on the other side. You'd walk through that, then you'd have a set of stairs to your left to go up into the second level, and then a small corridor that would lead you out into an apparatus bay floor. Continuing forward, you have a copy room, which is just going to be a file room, pretty self-explanatory, paper room, etc. Walking down towards the end, you have a shower facility. So you'll notice that there is if you were to turn that corner to your left, you'd be walking out to the apparatus bay floor. There's a shower facility, which would be the clean shower. And then you would go through that set of the single door, and then you'd have a shower facility off of the bay floor, which is now a decontaminating shower, which we currently don't have. So when we have firefighters that are getting exposed to all kinds of bad things. We do a gross decon on scene. They need to have the ability to have a shower and decontaminate themselves once they get back to the hall. This is a WorkSafe BC requirement. We currently do not have this. We also have the electrical and the water meter. Those are self-explanatory. And then you can enter the electrical room from that side and from the outside of the building. Am I going too fast? Good. On the apparatus bay floor, you'd have two sets of rooms. So if we're looking now at the front of the building again, two sets of rooms that have duty gear. This is for 30 firefighters that are there. Currently, we have 21 firefighters, including 2 paid staff that are there, with the anticipation that our max occupancy would be 26. So that's 2 paid, 24 paid on-call firefighters. So this would be all of the gears that are going to be off to the side. And then we have a little small alcove for lockers, because firefighters don't carry their street clothes or a change of clothes inside of their lockers for obvious contamination reasons. They would have a small set of lockers that would be there for them to put their own padlock on and keep their own things as spare change of clothes. Laundry janitorial, understanding that we have specific requirements for PPE and turnout gear. We bought a commercial extractor a few years ago that's in our current fire hall. This will be repurposed into this fire hall should it proceed. We also have a washer, dryer, just general laundry janitorial room. Okay, if we go across the bay floor to the what we'll call the spine, that's there. So we have an office that would be there for whomever, whatever reason. The intention is that it would be accessed for the entity that would be having the spare sets of bays that are on the bay on the end of the building. They'd have a storage room that would be off that side. Excuse me, the workroom. This isn't a workout room. This is a workroom for us to facilitate the repairs of chainsaws, SCBA equipment, any of our own tools, equipment in a respectable, or in a bit of a tool room workshop, so to speak. Then we have an SCBA room, understanding that this is where all of our spare storage bottles. This would likely be reconfigured. I think the workroom would actually be about the size of the SCBA room and vice versa, but this would be, this could also be our communications room. We'd have all of that information, or all of that sensitive equipment outside of the tool room. We also have a compressor room, understanding that our compressor is loud for us to refill the bottles that we have. If you've ever come through the fire hall and it's running, we have to actually lock the doors to prevent people from coming through there because the decibels are too high for occupancy without ear protection. Then we have a hose tower. So we currently have a hose tower in our building. This is where we use to train firefighters in high-rise, multi-story structures. We do not have the ability to do this at our training grounds. It does not go higher than 1 story. We don't have a stairwell, interior or exterior, at our training grounds. This is where we accomplish this training. Okay, with council's permission, I'll go to the 2nd floor. All right, so we'll start with the fitness area that's upstairs. So you'd come in the front doors, you go to your left, you'd go up a set of stairs, and then you'd be on the second floor. This very much is similar to the current setup that we have in an expanded model. So we have, if you've ever been to the fire hall, we have a pool table that's there. This is very much the social aspect to the building. So it's an area for firefighters to seek refuge, for decompression, for their own mental health, when they need to relax, when they need to take a load off, rehydrate, rehab, whatever that you want to say that would be there. So the fitness area is intended for that. Like I said, we currently have a fitness area that is at the fire hall. It's very, very generic. We had more equipment during COVID, but not all firefighters are comfortable with using the facilities that we currently have for a variety of reasons that I will not dive into. But this is much preferred to have it in-house where they can respond to an emergency should they be there. There is a covered patio, just making use of the space where the training grounds are. The training room on the 1st floor. This was just a dead space that was there because of the size of the training room. We thought instead of just having a roof and a nice picture window there, why not make a covered patio? That would just make better use of that space. There's a meeting table just for sit-down meals. That would be there. The kitchen is very, I guess it's a welcoming, it's not quite to the commercial kitchen style. There's no deep fat fryers. There's no nothing like that. It's going to be very, very basic in its concept. And I think a lot of this would be reworked. 2 washroom facilities, no showers upstairs. So they would still have to go downstairs because that's where their lockers would be. So that's where they'd be going for a shower. And then we have further storage and a mechanical room above on the second story. So mechanical room for this would be for the any of the air handling for the building. Yeah, it's just a mechanical room. Going over to above the spine, just making use of the space. This would be a mezzanine using for the firefighters, accessible through the hose tower. So we'd actually have space. Storage is always at a premium in any building that we have. So we're going to be looking at housing all of our spare turnout gear here, all of our, the cots that we currently have at the SAR Bay, any of that additional equipment, our extra hose, all of that stuff would be stored in the mezzanine area. And then we would have just an open ceiling space on the additional bays.
Well, thank you very much for that. If I can just follow up on page 37, you have a office for wildlife. Do we know what that's about? Or is that for the fire smart coordinator and it was just misprinted? I just curious, when I see all these offices space and we actually put names there like wildlife, I don't, just clarity so we understand what we're talking about here. Ms. Scott?
Yeah, and I see wildlife is used a few times throughout that report. My assumption is that it's a typo and it's for wildfire, but that's just my assumption. So again, I will ask Chief Curry if he can provide any additional information on whether the intention is actually for wildlife or if it is for wildfire.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. You are correct in the fact that it is a typo, but in Alberta, it is not wildfire that is the typo. This was actually for, my interpretation was supposed to be for search and rescue. It wasn't supposed to be for wildfire. Wildfire, everything fire related in the fire department, fire service is all contained on our side. That office where it says wildlife should have been, and they kept messing it up when I kept saying SAR. Apparently it's very close to something that Alberta uses for their wildlife conservation officers or something like that. So no, it is not anything to do with wildfire. It's a secondary space for the bay, whoever's going to be in that last set of bays.
So yeah, and I appreciate the comments, and I was wondering if that's what it was, and I meant to ask that earlier and forgot to, but it makes sense when you talk about the office. One thing you missed there was the wash bay. We only having one wash bay within this facility?
Oh.
I just, again, it's marked differently compared to where it's marked apparatus bays. It specifically states wash bay. Ms. Scott? It would be on the map.
I missed that.
Sorry, it's on
Yeah.
the map
Yes,
for the
I-
proposed
yeah,
main
yeah,
floor
I
plan.
see it there. So yes, again, I'll ask Chief Curry to provide some information on how many wash bays are necessary and if it really is the plan to just have the one wash bay or how many wash bays we do need.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So there would be drainage in all of the bays to allow for drainage, but the intentional wash bay would be very similar to what we have in our rescue bay right now with a pressure washer, the ability to wash down rigs, et cetera, that would be in there. We would be able to wash down with garden hoses, the typical way that we do it with our apparatus right now. So there'd be floor drains, but to actually have a wash bay where it would be, putting a pickup into it and getting all the ice off of it, or washing down the rescue because it was, on a Forest Service road and it's extremely muddy. That was the intention for this one bay to act as a wash bay.
Perfect. Appreciate the comments. Thank you. Councillor Julik.
Thanks for the clarification. I think for me, where I'm still going to, simply because I'm not a builder, so I just like seeing what's in front of me and this is the cost and all right. One of my thoughts is, as we're talking and getting more information here is that we, again, are a town that was built all at the same time. So the fire hall needs to be replaced. The town hall needs to be replaced, Public Works needs to be replaced, and thankfully we did some work at the community center, which from what I understand is still short on offices. So part of my thought process when talking about spending this money or looking at this I think that we have to prioritize or discuss what this looks like. This is 3 buildings. If we don't build a building now, and okay, maybe we don't spend 12 million, thing is we've already spent about $50,000 to get a plan in front of us. If we go back to them and say, no, this isn't the scope we want another scope, that's another $25,000. And I think that if council is going to start playing in the kitchen a little bit when it goes to that, I'm not saying how much money we spend is playing in the kitchen. What I'm saying is if we're saying to staff that we want a report done on these types of things, we need to give a cost price. Like if we're thinking, okay, we're gonna build a new building, a new fire hall, we have to figure out, and we're not gonna be happy when the report comes, we're gonna just keep doing this over and over, I think. Like I think we have to say, okay, well, I'm willing to spend 5 million, you know, or we gotta do down and dirty before we spend $30,000 on getting somebody else to do a report like this. Because like I said, we've got town hall and public works as well that we're gonna have to consider. So I think when we're talking about just the fire hall, I don't know that we can. Unless we start looking at what does that look like completely, as we look at accessibility studies. We don't have any buildings here, I don't think, that are accessible without some changes being done to them. So my question after all of that is, in the recommendation, sorry, let me flip my paper over, there's a second recommendation that we forward the topic of a new fire hall building project onto the budget deliberations. I'm willing to make that motion, and I'm looking at the mayor to see if I should do so.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Because I think we have to discuss it. I think just putting it off is one more thing that we'll just have to deal with down the road, and it feels like this can has been kicked down the road a few times.
No, appreciate comments, and I did see the motion, I have it circled as well. Ms. Scott, something was mentioned by Councillor Judick, and maybe she's had these conversations because I haven't. Are we looking at replacing town hall and the public works, or are we just looking for renos? Like, we just had somebody throw it out here that we're talking about rebuilding town hall and public works building. I've never heard that. I know that we've talked about the renovations that may need to happen. And I'm sorry, I want clarity because again, when that's thrown out, I mean, we definitely have live, options for residents, and all of a sudden they're hearing that we're talking about a fire hall for 12 million or 11, whatever, 12 million. And now we have councillors throwing out that we're talking about town hall, a new town hall and a new public works building.
No, we have not had conversations about replacing those buildings.
Okay, that's good enough. Staff did. It's good enough. Okay, staff clarify, because I know we have it in the plans about some of the renovations that are needed at town hall and then as well at public works. Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. You know, just because we spent this money on this study doesn't mean we should take the first thing that comes across our desk. So like, you know, that's where I'm at in this. You know, we looked at our budget discussions, deliberations last year, and $100,000 is 1%. How much would this mean if we don't get grant funding? You know, we're looking at, say, even half of this financed over 10 years. We're looking at, 5% every year, just on this. So now we have no room for any expansion in our budgets. It's something we got to think about as well. Like, this isn't just going to be the only tax increase. We may have to start looking at cutting other services to our municipality to cover this, depending on the fee structure that we could arrange, right? Maybe there's a 40-year out there. I don't know. That's great. I know that through borrowing, we can get tax shields, we can pay less tax. Maybe, there's a great way we can fund this. As Chief Curry said, there may be grant funding out there, which I would like to see. And I mean, so putting it on the budget deliberations makes sense because we have to say yes to something and see what's out there. But at this point in time, with this price tag, right now, without any other funding options, it would be a disservice to say, yes, let's put it on the budget, unless we have these other conditions met. Because realistically, I couldn't justifiably say yes until we have some other large granting option. Thanks.
Just before I go to Councillor Julik, I did have a conversation with the CEO, because I remember there was some discussion, and I don't know if it was when I was first elected or my first term of council, but when the municipality decides that they may need to go and borrow money, so asking for a loan, my understanding there was a number that if you hit a certain amount that you're asking for, that you would send it out. I called it a referendum, but she actually called it something else, that it's, it has to be properly advertised to the residents of Tumbler Ridge and stuff to have a say. If they would support the DTR going for, and I understand, I think there was somewhere mentioned within the report that there's some money in reserves and such, but same thing, can't drain all our reserves just for the replacing one building when we have renovations on others. But Ms. Scott, would you be able to talk to, I know you probably didn't have an opportunity to look up if there's an amount that triggers that, but would you just be able to just have a light discussion about it until we were able to dig into that?
Any borrowing requires elector approval.
There you go. Any problem.
All borrowing requires electoral approval. There's a couple different ways that you can do it. One is the assent vote, which is essentially a referendum. The other way is the alternative approval process, which is basically a way that council can more or less, I think they call it testing the waters, to see what you would get for public support. And through the alternative approval process, notification goes out to the public that you intend to borrow. There's a process for those who are opposed to it to be able to register those oppositions with the district. If more than 10% of the population is opposed to it, then that's when council would decide, do we want to go to referendum or the assent vote and get a real test or a real idea of what the population wants. If there's less than 10% that oppose the borrowing, then council gets a certificate from the province to proceed.
Okay, thank you for that. And it's any borrowing, so that's good to know, but that was one of my questions. And it is because there's only so much money in reserve, and to me, it looked like, I mean, obviously, staff had already mentioned, there may, where do you look? We've got to start looking at the train for grants and such like that. But if those opportunities aren't there due to maybe whatever, maybe when staff had mentioned about, I believe it was Mackenzie, it was used, it was 90 or 95% covered by grants. Maybe there was grants certain times that they were able to get that may not be available in 2025 or 2027 or whatever when we're looking for those same kind of grants. So that was my question to Ms. Scott earlier, was if we had to borrow money, how does it work? I couldn't remember, and I appreciate it. And it's any money that we decide to go and borrow through a loan that would have to, the residents would also have a little bit of a say if they were to support, well, geez, or we can't support that or whatever. So there is that. My other comment, just before I go to Councillor Julick, would be, to me, if we're not willing to put this forward for budget discussion, I understand what Councillor Norbury said and such. To me, we just need to make sure we give some kind of direction. To me, staff worked very hard. It may be hard to come and do the report for them, but I guarantee you, staff had a pulse on this. Staff was involved in it. There's multiple staff hours. When you can hear staff, I know he had to pull it up on his computer, staff had to pull it up on the computer, but, they spoke pretty much turn right, turn left. So, I mean, that there's a pulse there. So to me, if we're not wanting to move this forward for discussion within a budget of 2025, to me, we just need to make sure we have clear direction on what we want staff to bring back. And one of my concepts here and such is there an opportunity when we talk about grants, when we start looking at adding an RCMP building to it and a BC ambulance? We're talking about, and I understand where staff said, trying to talk to multiple different governments. Yep. But maybe there's a push. I mean, that's, that is, staff has to reach out, but that's something that council can advocate for. I have quite a few contacts to make sure we're pushing this through so we have an answer, but there is other options out there for some funding model. Councillor Julick.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I hear what Councillor Norbury is saying, and you, Mayor Kirkauka. My point in saying about spending the dollars on the report wasn't that we just choose this because this is the one that was in the report. My thought is if we're asking staff to go out again, that I feel like we need to give them our expectations. Like if it's like when I phone for a quote and they start with a $200 quote, I'm like, oh, no, I'm not looking for $200, I'm looking for $100. And I think that if that's where council's going as a whole, then when we talk to staff and we say, you know what, they might come with 12 million, but we're looking something closer to 5 or whatever that means. That was kind of where I was going with that. I'm, other than sitting down and counting screws and nails, to me, this proposal's been brought to us. I think that it looks good. I hear about, anyways, I've already said why I like it. My point being is I don't think we need to spend another $30,000 until we are clear to staff about what it is we're looking at. So we've looked at this and we've got a few people that aren't comfortable with the amount, then what are you gonna be comfortable with? Because we can send it out again, and what if it comes back at another 12 and we're another year down the road and we're getting less because now costs have come up? Like, I know that we can play the what-if game, and we've talked about that a lot around this table. I think, again, I would reiterate, we just keep kicking this can down the road. And to clarify, on Mayor Kauka, now that I got the mic, is I didn't mean that Town Hall and Public Works were getting replaced. What my point was is we have a fire building that is aging out, which means our other services are aging out. So in the future, it's like keeping up on our water and sewer. We have buildings that we need to keep up on as well. So I don't foresee no cost going into those assets in the future either.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I understand your comments, and my thing is, I don't think we need a $30,000, another $30,000 report. I mean, to me, we need to decide, like, you know, again, I look at, you know, when staff mentions there's grants out there, we'll start digging and let it come back to us. But to me, this is an opportunity to also reach out. Again, I'm gonna mention it, BC Ambulance, RCMP. If they don't want to build their own, but they're willing to sign a lease, what's the cost to add it onto this facility that has been put in front of us? And if we're still not happy with, okay, it comes in, you know, we know what the proposed budget for a brand-new fire hall is. It's $12 million. To me, I would like to see other options, like what, you know, and I understand staff had mentioned, well, we have the building plans and the downtown core that was approved, yeah, but doesn't mean we can't look at something else. To me, downtown core isn't in the location that staff has picked. Their first selection is just off of Pioneer Loop and Mackenzie. So to me, I think we need to have some, you know, like, you know, I appreciate it, and it's not that, you know, staff didn't go to work and look. I mean, they're coming forward. Here's what our needs and such are, and we heard it from staff. There's not a whole bunch of wants in here. It was mentioned by staff, and I think it's very important that it was mentioned by staff. It's not a bunch of wants. Do I think that we need to have an extra bay for search and rescue? I don't know. Is that our mandate? I mean, we talked about possibly that's for BC Ambulance. Well, BC Ambulance is an Alpha car, which is full-time, which is like the fire hall that was built, and then ambulance was added to it, and then realized they went to an Alpha, and now they needed sleeping quarters. Sorry? Okay, take a recess, 5-minute recess. I call the PMP back to order. So just before we took a break there, like I said, I think there's opportunities to look at that, and maybe there's different kind of grants when it comes to adding the BC ambulance in a federal building, which would be the RCMP. Maybe there's already grants out there, and staff haven't had that opportunity. So, I think we need to get to a point, but I mean, we need to make sure that if we're not going to move it forward and start talking about budget and how we're going to budget for it, and we're looking for staff to do a different direction, we just got to make sure that direction is clear, exactly what we're looking for. I got Councillor Norbury and then Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Mayor Kakaka. So, Councillor just made a comment, like what were we willing to put? Like what number were we willing to say? Honestly, it's impossible for me to say. Like honestly, my first initial thought was like half, bring us half grants. But I don't know how much a fire building costs. That'd be doing a disservice because I'm just picking a number out of the hat. I'm just saying, well, I don't want to pay this much, so that's that, right? I know that, we're tripling the size of the 6 to 18, tripling the size of a potential building. If we cut that in half, it wouldn't cost half because it usually doesn't work that way. It's probably 3/4. So my thought would be, if we could put this forward through budget, staff can come up with a bunch of grants, brings the cost down, because we got to have something out there for them to go after, right? Like the purpose of these reports is to utilize for grants, or to go to your funders, which is us, which is the public, to say this is what we need, this is how much it's going to cost, right? So to say 6 million would be a disservice because I don't know what 6 million really would buy. Because I don't build fire halls. So it's hard to say a definitive amount other than something else.
Thank you. Councillor Julik.
So I guess that's my discussion, or that's my question, is how do we get there? Because I hear what you're saying, 12 million isn't your number, but then do we spend $30,000 to have them come back with a $9 million number? You know what I mean? Like I hear what you're saying, Councillor Norbury. I'm just wondering, how do we get there so we do like Mayor Kakauka said, so that if we're going to give staff clear direction, how do we get there? And I guess for me, when I have a report that comes in front of me and it says $12 million and I say, holy moly, it's like if I go and I want to buy a new truck, and they get there and they tell me 75,000, I'm gonna say, well, no, I only have this much money. That's where I'm coming from. Like, so we still have to kind of, I think in my head, have a number. I did like last year, like, what does this look like if we said we're only gonna spend about 10 million? What does that take off of this? Like, like, do we work backwards to what we want and what that looks like for loans and stuff like that? But to me, we have to have a fairly strong way forward, and I don't know when we get to that point. Do we discuss that tonight to get to where we want to go back with staff, or do we do that in budget deliberations? I don't know. I guess I'm asking Mayor Kakauka with your experience, because I don't think this is something we put off for another year.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I might let staff answer that too. I mean, this is a staff report. This is what they're proposed. I mean, there is, like, again, to me, I understand budget discussions, let's have a conversation there, but to me, it doesn't sound like, just filling the table. It doesn't seem like $12 million is something that we're willing to spend, but all of a sudden the staff come back and says, oh, we got $11.5 million in grants. We only have to put in $500,000. Well, where do we sign, right? But there is other options out there. And I mean, it's not about spending another $30,000 of reports. Let's I'm being honest. I used Beaver Lodge because that was one of the newer halls that I'd seen built when I was traveling. There's other halls I can mention. It's a phone call. Grand Prairie County built it. How much did it cost? Can you send us some inside pictures? This is what you get for $3.8 million. This is what you get for $5.5 million. Maybe it doesn't fit certain things, then we just need to know that. But again, to me, is there, like, staff talked about grants. So to me, the direction is, let's start reaching out, see what there is available for grants with the report we have. Is there an opportunity, and I understand from staff working with multiple different governments and such, we know what it's like to go and deal with, to me, the BC government. When we go to UBCM, we're doing asks and begging for money, whether it be for our museum and our geoparks and the healthcare system. We know what it's like when we go there. Staff have that same feeling when they start reaching out to their contacts, looking for certain things and getting the runaround. But to me, that, like, what's out there that's available for grants, what does it look like from BCM inside in regards to, they would take over those 2 bays. They don't want to own them, they want to lease them, but we need to add on a small sleeping area. I don't know. Again, I believe staff had mentioned they've had light conversations, haven't really gotten in depth. Maybe that's the direction we need to see if we have some partnerships between the two organizations, the RCMP and BC Ambulance. What does that look like? What's the timeline for that? Don't know. Does this start getting added to the 2025 budget? I don't know. But when we talk about, we know what we see when we try to deal with government. To me, it's going to be the same way. So are we putting this back by a little bit to get all the information council wants to have in front of them to say, well, obviously they're not going to come to the table, so either we're going to go $12 million, or again, what were those other halls, and would those fit our needs? Would those fit the future needs? Well, we can do this. Yes, it's the cost overall is cheaper because we're not putting on the wood on, and this still meets all this criteria. It's still going to have the emergency center inside of it in case we have to activate it. It's going to have, then you can have a look at it. That's my opinion. Like, to me, staff has brought something that they've fed information into a report or into an organization to build a report for us or for them. With to me, what the requirements are through WorkSafe BC, what the requirements are for the department that we have today, the volunteer firefighters. What they don't have today, but they need to have through WorkSafe BC has been added within the sketches. That's what was talked about from staff. You know, they have the proper wash down facilities for contamination. You know, they talk about a wash bay, they already have a wash bay. This one's just gonna be isolated to one side, just like it is today and such. So there is a little bit more that we could just send back and ask staff for that, but I just want confirmation from staff, like, the same question. How do we move it forward?
What was the question exactly?
Do you wanna ask it again, Councillor Julik? I answer mine.
I'm just wondering, how do we move forward if council, the feel here tonight is that the $12 million would probably not be okayed if we were to have to take a vote tonight. So how do we move forward that we're not doubling down on work for staff and get to a dollar amount that we might be more comfortable with? I don't know what the next steps are basically, and how do we get there without putting this project on the back burner?
I think one of the things you have to consider, and Director Correa had already said this too, this isn't the Cadillac building. This is what they've determined are their basic core needs. So if you're gonna start reducing what those, I mean, does that mean that they don't have enough bays and they're parking their vehicles elsewhere? Does that mean we don't have a training room? Does that mean, this is things that they've determined are their core needs. And so I don't know if it's fair to even consider what Beaver Lodges cost, because we don't know what Beaver Lodges is. Is there 2 bays? Is there 12 bays? We don't know. And so I guess maybe I'll ask Director Curry to maybe chime in as well on what he thinks he might need from direction from council in order to consider other options. But like I said, they've already said, like, this is basically their core needs. But again, I'll ask Director Curry if he's got any additional information to add.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. And thank you, council. This is exactly what I was hoping to get from tonight, is meaningful discussion about the future of this project. My intention when I wrote the report was to get this type of a conversation going, to see if we're even in the ballpark of the same needs. It sounds like we differ on a few things, but it sounds like we're all in the same guys, that we understand that, yeah, a new building needs to be built, but we've got various levels of costs that are there. So that's what the second component to the recommendation was have this discussion, take it to budget, because at budget, you can always take it out of the budget just as easy. And then I can have, once we have at least that confirmation at this point, then I can have the meaningful conversations with our CFO to determine all of the different kind of scenarios. Is it 100% grant funding? Do we say 90% grant funding and then yes, it's a go ahead, we can put it to council? I don't know if we'll be able to make that for this budget season, but at least then we have something that's shelf ready that we can move forward with. As the mayor explained, yes, there are lots of different ways to build a fire hall. There are versions of it where it's the industrial steel-looking building with one office and a small little room that's there, and it's nothing more than that, because that is the type of buildings that are surrounding it. There are what we presented to you tonight. So there are various different and differing concepts that are there. If council wishes us to to look at that and said, no, we want to see what the absolute bare bones, you have nothing that's there and it probably won't fit your need, or it will fit your needs, but it won't look great and it'll still accomplish the job. That's the direction that we'd be looking for. Understanding that there will be a cost associated to it, because I cannot simply just call up Beaver Lodge and say, how much did that fire hall cost you? Because when it was built 3 years ago, it's vastly different than it is now. So there's still gonna be some costs that are gonna be associated with it. It definitely isn't gonna be $30,000 or in that neighborhood, but there is gonna be a cost associated with any development of any type of conceptual drawings from engineering standpoint, electrical engineering, structural engineering, mechanical engineering, et cetera.
Thank you for that. And appreciate the comments from staff when you talk about it. You can't just call them up. And I appreciate those comments. The same aspect, you can look at a construction type building and it still has all the office spaces. It still has all that. There's other halls that have been built the same way. So, you know, I understand from staff's concepts in regards to making sure that, you know, there's some clear direction and such from our side. Councillor Clickash, then Councillor Norbury.
Yes, your worship. I don't think there's too many people here that know how to design or take things out of buildings. And I think, you know, we should go ahead with putting this on the budget and then look for money in the future for it. It might take 2 or 3 years or 4 years to get the money, you know, to do this project. But the thing is, you know, there's the other thing that we haven't been raising taxes like we should have. And that's why we're way behind on the amount of money that were raised through taxes. And, you know, like it's time to start looking at that too. You know, you can't just go every year and not increase your taxes to support your town. And so I feel that this is, Chief Curry's got a good scenario here. Everything seems to be in good shape. He's done a lot of work on this, and so have his engineers and so forth. And the thing is, I don't think we should start taking stuff apart. I've seen this happen before in other scenarios, and when you start having a bunch of people trying to take something apart to lower the cost, it all goes to hell. And so that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Kakelka. Yeah, I mean, with Councillor Clickash's comments, I don't think you can just carve something out and it's good. You have to get it re-engineered. And I mean, fair enough, right? I would be okay spending another $20,000, $30,000 in an engineered document if it meant we saved $3 million. Because now our costs are $2.97 million less. So I'd be okay with that if that was presented. But I'm also okay with now putting something out there, putting on the budget to see if we can get funds for it. Because, you know, yeah, you miss every shot you don't take. Let's see what's out there. And I know grants aren't just falling off trees, but it's worthwhile for us to look for them. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Jilek.
I feel like we're at the point where we need to make a motion to,
Just about to ask for it.
all right, that council forwards the topic of a new fire hall building project onto 2025 budget deliberations.
Seconder. Councillor Clickash, discussion. I'll make a comment. The only concern I have is, again, we're not looking at giving direction for staff to reach out previously to BC Ambulance or CMP. That's my concern. It can be discussed in budget, but it can be discussed right now and they can start working on it as we go through our budgets. That's my concern. Councillor Julik?
Yeah, like I think that that's a good idea. If we need to, I can amend that motion, or we can make a second motion, I think, because I think we still do it to the 2025. I don't have a problem, like, because it could be one phone call and they'd be like, nope, or they'd be like, yeah, we'd be interested. Is like, if that's all we're kind of looking for at this point, because it sounds to me like we're looking for we're looking for a few ways to mitigate costs. And so I would be in favor of doing that. So I would be happy to make a second motion after this one.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think it's one phone call. I think it's some commitment, time commitment to sit down with these guys. Like, it's not one phone call. It's, we need to know where we're at. To me, it's about what we're gonna build, and then how do we, instead of them building their separate ones, if it can be built together, and if they're not willing to build their own, but they're willing to lease it, that is a way of offsetting our cost over the 40 years or 45 years. Because they're not only gonna pay for what we build for them, there's gonna be money made from it. That's the good thing about building a building and leasing it. Councillor Knox-Adam.
Thank you. I think we're a bit ahead of the game trying to talk about this in the 2025 budget discussions. We have a lot of conversations to get to the point where we're ready to move forward. And I feel like that should happen before we have it in a budget meeting. I'd be comfortable pushing it to 2026 and having those conversations with BC Ambulance and grant funding, things like that ahead of time. But this seems a bit rushed for this year.
Thank you. Councillor Julik.
I think for me, why I'm content to put it on to 2025 deliberations is so sitting in the room and comparing to what else we have to do and what that looks like for a tax increase or that kind of thing. Like, I think I would be able to make the decision as well in the 2025. I think the difference between the budget deliberations and in today's meeting is when we start talking about nickels and dimes and what else we have on that budget. I just think if we leave it another year, then this is something that we're possibly leaving for another council. I'm not saying that we don't do it because it could be the other council. I just think that we have to stay on top of it. I know 2 councils ago, I was sitting in the gallery when we talked about making renovations to Town Hall. So I think it's important that we do it for this. I see where you're going. I just think that we can get some answers. I don't think I know I'm not expecting that in that deliberations that we will be saying yes to the 12 million.
Thank you. Yeah, and, I want to bring up past discussions. It was, a lot of the thing that hold up was over color of a building when it came to Town Hall. Weird, but staff spent a lot of time on that one. But yeah, I have the same concern that to me it feels rushed throwing it in a 2025 budget when to me we've started minimal talks in our 2025 budget, and now we're going to jam it into the last end of our budget. That's what we're going to do. Sure, we may pull it out, we may whatever. To me, I think clear direction needs to be for staff to reach out to these organizations, get their thoughts and opinions, and if they seem on board, let's start looking at how we sign contracts and such, but it also gives opportunities for grants so we know where we're at. To me, when we have already re-established a budget meeting schedule, and then we're going to try jamming this in and try and have those discussions. I just can't support it. Councillor Jilek.
I guess, sorry, I think I guess I'd need some more clarification though. My thought when I made the motion going forward was that we would have the discussion with the CFO in the room, giving us some different options about financing and what that would look like. I by no means thought we were going there to approve it, but I felt like if we didn't talk, like we don't have any, for me in this moment, like I just want to look at what that looks like down the road, and that's where I was thinking I would get some more information at that meeting, was why I wanted to talk about it. Not that I thought we would be cramming it through or anything like that. So
Yeah.
am I misunderstanding?
No, I think you're somewhat right that it would get on there. We'd have some discussions. Staff had already mentioned it gives them an opportunity to meet with the CFO, kind of discuss funding modules, and do we do 75% dependent on grants, just like we did the spray park and such. But again, to me, it seems like we were trying to rush this into a budget that is, to me, we're already behind a bit, in my opinion, when we've missed meetings and had to cancel meetings, and then do it. A new budget schedule off the fly without having all of our calendars in front of us, and sometimes dates are picked for budget meetings that people are already committed to something else. So to me, putting this in a budget that's what it feels like to me. Rush it into the budget. Yeah, it doesn't mean it's approved in the budget. It's just in regards to budget discussion. That's up to council, but again, to me personally, I feel that it's being rushed into a budget so that we can try to have those conversations. Those conversations can still happen without it being within the budget of 2025. There could be clear direction given to staff of what we are looking for. And I'm not saying that look for a different building that's whatever, but if that is what we want to see as another option, it doesn't hurt to see what another option is, and maybe the other option isn't any cheaper. I mean, staff had mentioned it. Some of these halls were built, I mentioned, were built 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and geez, maybe that cost is no different, whether it's wood and looks beautiful or if it's tin. I don't know. But to me, I just feel it's rushed, so I won't be supporting the motion. Councillor Clickash.
Yes, I think if you're going to go ahead with this in the budget, and you want more information, I think, like one of the people that have got their stamp on the back of the page there should be the person that goes and talks to the RCMP. And they would have all the information of costs, and they would also be able to give them a lease, probably a lease idea on the building. So I think we should get the architect to phone them and get the information.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that works if it would be staff or they'd hire an organization.
Because you got to have all the information in front of you.
Yep, I agree. Okay, any more discussion? Okay, the motion that's on the floor is that council forwards the topic of a new fire hall building project on to 2025 budget deliberations. Going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Dussault, Councillor Noxana, Councillor Noberry, and Mayor Kukalka opposed. Motion is defeated. Councillor Noberry.
That council forwards the topic of a new fire hall building project onto the 2026 budget deliberations.
Seconder, Councillor Noxana. Discussion. I'll support that motion. It gives us time to give other direction to staff to look at other options. Any other discussion? Councillor Noberry.
Thank you, Mayor Kukalka. My only comment would be that we are looking at 2 years of capital projects now. That's give us some time to take it back, figure it out, not be rushed. Yeah. Also, tell us, let's get more information. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, the motion on the floor is to, the council forwards the top of the new fire hall building project onto the 2026 budget deliberations. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Julick's opposed. Motion is carried. I'm going to put another motion out there that we ask staff to contact the BC Ambulance, RCMP, to see where they're at in regards to new buildings, and if they plan to build their own building, or if something was to be built by the DTR, if they would do a lease. Seconder? Councillor Noberry, discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Okay, anything else in regards to the fire hall feasibility study? Moving on to golf cart rentals, report dated January 13th, 2025, from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding golf cart rentals. Recommendation, please. Councillor Julick.
That the report on the use waivers and deposits for renting golf carts to youth be received for discussion.
Seconder. Councillor Noxana. All in favor? Carried. Councillor.
I am in favor of staff's recommendation that we simply do not rent to underage golfers.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Noxana.
Thank you. I'm in favor of staff's recommendation as well, but I would like to see this advertised sooner in the golf season pass sale year. If we could have that information out to youth and their parents or guardians before they buy their membership, hopefully, so that they can make an informed decision at that time.
Okay, we need a mic motion. Councillor Noxana.
I motion that we advertise the change of this policy sooner rather than later.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Dussault. Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Mayor Kukalka is opposed. Motion carries. Any more discussion? I'll make a comment. It states right at the very bottom on page 91 that it's actually not something that can't be done. I think for the amount of time this council has already spent, whether it's in regards to strategic planning, it was all about this youth. We got to do more for the youth. We got to do more for the youth center and add things and see if they would partake and stuff. And again, I've heard from multiple, I mean, I'll say youth, but also their parents. And when we have parents that are willing to take this on, you know, liability, when I see that, I mean, we've had this conversation that we do other things that take on even more liability to minors. We had this conversation, that's why I had this report done up, is because we actually take on more liability with other things we offer, but there doesn't seem to be an issue with that. So, Councillor Noxana.
Thank you. I'd like to point out that, yes, this can be done, and a $5,000 damage deposit can be taken from the parent or legal guardian, which would cover our, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. It would cover our, like our insurance deductible. However, that doesn't cover us in the event of an injury. And it doesn't even say here if that injury could be to the youth that rented the cart or another golfer that was injured in an incident.
Yeah, you know, I think I read it and it says identification from injury may be harder to defend. It says may, the word may. May goes a long way. It's just my 2 cents. Councillor Gillick?
Yeah, and I think where I was swayed, it was because we had lawyers and our insurance tell us twice. They didn't think it was a good idea. So I think that was a piece for me. Honestly, I've seen adults drive them not in an appropriate way either. I just know that for me, those 2 times being told by lawyers and insurance companies, and also, I lost my train of thought too. Maybe we're already too late into the night. I just think that it just doesn't make sense if we're told, oh, I know what it was. It was staff. In order to do it the other way, there was a lot of steps that had to be followed with staff. And I know what it's like just to get on the golf course now by the time you pay your fees and stuff like that. So then if we're adding that many more paperwork burdens to our staff, and then also the added burden of having to say no without a policy in place. And I also believe that if we were to go ahead with this, we would have to look at having somebody out on the course more regularly. And I know a course marshal is another hot topic that we have at our council meeting. So those would be the pieces for me that if we were to go ahead, we'd have to have a course marshal as well. And so I see an additional cost to that. So right now, maybe if we had more people come to council and say, this is a hardship or whatever like that. I hear what you're saying, Mayor Kakauka, I just at this point can't be on the same page.
Nope, no problem. You don't have to be. Councillor Noberry.
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. In the, you know, how many people are upset, you know, since we made this change mid-season, we had 2 complaints about it. My big thing is that we have our lawyers that went out and said, you shouldn't be renting carts to anybody under 19 without a valid driver's license. You know, it's on page 91, 4th paragraph down. It's right there. We shouldn't be doing it. Not if could we do it, it says you shouldn't. You know, same thing with our municipal insurance. Risk management is not recommended to renting carts to minors. You know, okay, we got away with it for a long time. It's great, but we asked the question and they said, you know, wait a second, you guys shouldn't be doing this. Probably the same thing that staff figured out as well when they stopped renting carts. So at this point in time, like my thought is, if we go against these 2 recommendations, are we responsible? Legally, maybe, maybe not. Morally, yeah. So, and that's where I'm at. Like, we have 2 professionals saying you shouldn't do this thing. Yeah, I'll take the heat from the public. Sorry, guys, but we have people saying we shouldn't do it, and you listen to the recommendation.
Yep,
Thanks.
no problem. Appreciate comments. Okay, any other discussion in regards to golf cart rentals? Okay, moving on to Public Works Policy Review, report dated January 13th, 2025. From the Director of Corporate Services, bringing the Public Works policies for review. And there's 4 recommendations, and we'll do 1 recommendation at a time. Councilor Noberry?
Thank you, Mayor Kukoc. I actually wanted to bring up a policy before motioning these. Should we do that first or just wait till we get to those sections? I want to bring up snow clearing policy.
It's on here. It's on here under number 4, PW 16 snow clearing.
Okay, well, okay. We'll start
Discuss it then.
Yeah, okay. Number 1, that PW3 water sewer service calls policy changes be approved as presented and forwarded to a regular council meeting for formal approval.
Seconder, Councillor Julick. Discussion. Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Number 2.
That the PW5 refuse metal disposal be forwarded to a regular council meeting to be repealed.
Seconder, Councillor Julick. Discussion. Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Number 3.
That the PW11 loan of District of Tumbler Ridge metal detector policy changes be approved as presented and forwarded to a regular council meeting for formal approval.
Seconder, Councillor Noxana. Discussion. Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Number 4.
I would like to bring forward PW16 snow clearing policy for discussion.
Seconder, Councillor Dussault. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Kukoc. Apologize for bringing this up, on the fly, but, it's been a while since we looked at our snow clearing policy and priorities map. That's what I was hoping to discuss. Going back to when last council made this policy, one of the key factors that was determined at the time, and this council could change that, but one of the key determining factors was getting kids to school, getting access to the emergency room. With that ideology in my mind about getting kids to school, one of the spots that we're missing is the area behind the school. I believe it's Aspen Crescent. Like, they're being told by the school to drop their kids off there, but it's not being plowed. So my thoughts is I'd like to see that area be added to the high priority for the school time drop-off, especially if the schools are recommending it.
Put a motion forward.
I'll make a motion that we add from Spruce to the end of Aspen to the high priority. That's it.
Seconder, Councillor Julick. Discussion. My question first would be to staff. Do we have the equipment and manpower to be able to add that?
It's my understanding that we are, even though it's not actually shown on this map, that it is being done. But I will ask Director Bradley if he can provide some additional information about whether or not we have the equipment and what the current timeline looks like for snow removal on Aspen.
Thank you, Ms. Scott, Mayor and Council. Yes, currently, so we send out the Public Works crew at 6 a.m. to take care of these areas. Aspen is being taken care of during this time. It would just be a matter of updating this policy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any more discussion in regards to the motion on the floor to add Spruce up to Aspen on high priority? Sounds like from staff it's already being done, just needs to be colored into green. Call the question, all in favor? Carried. Any other discussions first in regards to the snow clearing policy? Okay, motion with number 4.
That the Policies and Priorities Committee accepts a review of the following Public Works policies with changes to the snow clearing policy. PW12 hazard trees, PW13 loan of District of Tumbler Ridge game camera, and PW16 snow clearing as amended.
Seconder, Councillor Noxana. Discussion, Councillor Julick.
I just wanted to clarify on the very bottom of the policy, and I probably just missed it in my reading, but it says, please place the marker in your window so our operators can see it from the road. But when I looked further into that windrow removal assistance form, I couldn't see anywhere where that it talked about a marker. So I just wanted to clarify that it just wasn't something that got missed with the whole reading thing.
Ms. Scott? Can you throw out a page number, please, Councillor Julick? Thank you. Yeah, on the very bottom, it talks about it.
So, remove these from the form because
So what's your question? Do they actually have a marker that they put in their window?
Yeah, I just wondered, because it wasn't listed anywhere else into the form, so I just thought maybe it was something got missed, and it's easier to catch it now than later.
Thank you.
It is my understanding that that bottom line on the form that talks about placing the marker, that should be removed. That was an oversight. We aren't doing that, and that should be removed from the form.
Okay, need a motion to remove it. Because there's a motion on the floor, so it needs to be an amendment. Councilor Norbury?
I'll amend the motion to include the removal of the last line of the driveway snow windrow removal assistance form.
Okay, seconder on the amendment, Councilor Julik. Any discussion on the amendment, sorry? Call the question on the amendment, all in favor? Amendment carries. Any discussion on the amended motion? Call the question, all in favor? Carried. All right, take adjournment. Councilor Noxana.
That the January 13th, 2025 Policies and Priorities Committee meeting be adjourned.
Seconder, Councilor Dussault. All in favor? Carried.